Dr. Shannon PT with another episode of Need to Know in 5. Today we have a super exciting topic. We're going to talk about the importance of colors in our babies' lives, and that explains the fabulous do we have going on today. So, a lot of you may not realize it, that even though we hear a lot about color in child development, there's not as much research in this area as there is about the relationship of colors and how adults perceive it and how it helps us with our memory and our mood and everything else. But it's safe to assume that there's enough research with the adults that that information makes a lot of sense for our children in their development as well. So, if we think about when a child is first born, usually they can only see about 8 to 12 inches. That's it. And this makes sense because this way the baby can really focus on what they need to be doing during this time, is developing those bonds and being close to when they're being held. They can see the parents, the caregivers, developing those relationships. And it also makes sense in regards to breastfeeding that they are close to the body and that they're able to see very clearly what's going on. So even though a lot of people oftentimes with babies give them very bright colored toys and stuff to play with, a lot of times it's actually too stimulating for the babies. Starting up to about 1 to 2 months, babies really prefer black and white, sometimes red colors, very high contrast when you put black and white next to each other or even with a red. They also enjoy a lot with patterns. And so in particular, circle shape is a preferred pattern for babies. And again, this goes back to thinking about the evolution and development of our children, that they are able to see the breast much better with the contrast between the skin and the nipple, and also with it being a circular pattern, that this all goes back to what in nature has been done or created to make it optimum for babies for survival, and in this case in regards to their feeding. So really when you have a child early on in development, it's more about having very simple toys with this high contrast, maybe a really cool pattern of some sorts with circles. It's what's going to hold their attention the best. And you don't need a bunch of these toys everywhere. You really only want 1 or 2 of these toys for the baby to focus on, so then that way their brains can focus on 1 or 2 objects and then not be overstimulated with a bunch of baby toys that are brightly colored in their area, because it's very overwhelming for their brain to have to decipher these things. Then as your child's getting to around the 3 to 6 month age, that's when they start to really have a preference for colors, and you'll see that their eyes will turn in directions toward bright colors, in particular primary colors, and also with the patterns. So usually around that time is when it's a better time to start adding in some of these really brightly colored objects for children to play with, the rattles and such. That's the time, starting at about 3 months, that you would want to introduce these really bright, vibrant colors to your child, because again, that's going to be interacting, engaging, but not be as overwhelming to them, because their eyes are starting to catch up with where they need to be in development and being able to see all these crazy colors. Then at the 6 to 12 month mark, you can really start to look at the environment that your baby is in on a daily basis. You can start to look at maybe adding some different things into the nursery with some different pictures or different splashes of color, or maybe the play areas throughout the house. Maybe you can add a little bit different setup or structure, again adding some different colors or some different patterns for stimulation during the 6 to 12 months. What you really want to make sure of though is that you just don't have a wall of a whole bunch of really brightly colored and patterned stuff, because as we know, even with adults, again, it's so stimulating to have all of that going on at one time. And it's the same thing for an infant, especially if they're trying to figure out maybe what toy they want, or if we're trying to get them to focus on something. It's very hard to do when all they can see is a bunch of colors and patterns. So you really want to think about the balance of the environments and the colors that your child is exposed to, both in the nursery and in their play areas. Try to have different things where some areas are bright and maybe some areas are more pastel. Some areas have more stimulation with all the toys being visible for the child to interact with, and other areas maybe the toys are in bins and has a little bit more of an organized or cleaner lines where there's not so many things that are visually stimulating for them. So, thank you so much for watching our episode today. I hope you learned a lot about how color can affect your baby's development, and also about making color choices to keep your child calm and happy. Thanks for watching. See you next time on the Need to Know in 5.